Good evening, ladies and gentlemen who are listening to this record. This is going to be a direct continuation of where we ended up last time, still answering questions from a group of young women concerning various aspects of the psychology of sex, man-woman relationships, and related problems. Let's begin with the first question, please.
What are the qualities in a woman that make her popular with homosexuals? It's a very crude expression. Oh, she's a fag hag. They refer to her as being camp, a lot of laughs. What is this empathy between them?
Well, I think that the first characteristic that the woman has to have, very often anyway, is that she not be too obviously sexual, that she not be sexually threatening, that she be insecure herself in the role of a woman, so that she's not a threat. You see, it's a two-way street. I assume you're talking about the kind of woman who is not really popular with homosexuals, but who very frequently surrounds herself with homosexuals and seeks the company of homosexuals. And she does so, I believe, principally because they don't represent a sexual challenge to her. She is able to feel like a woman very cheaply or easily, you might say, because from their perspective, she is, of course, a woman. But there's no sexual challenge because they're not interested in her sexually, and they are not putting forth assertive male sexuality. So it's a very easy path to feel like a woman without having to be a woman or to accept herself as a woman or to feel confident as a woman, and without having to confront the challenge of self-confident male sexuality. And I have known in my time women who fit this category, who are insecure as women, and to somehow always end up with homosexual friends. And it looks like it's happening by chance to know what the pattern is. Or if not homosexual friends, then very unmasculine men. And you can see this type of woman kind of smiling and glowing, and she feels like she's a queen in the non-homosexual sense of that word. She feels like she's a real woman, and of course she has very deep-seated doubts about her femininity. But relative to these guys, she can feel, here I am a woman, without the challenges or difficulties of being a woman.
Some women often complain that men are always making passes at them. Do you think they could be unconsciously encouraging such responses?
Oh, I think so. I think that we have an awful lot to do with how people treat us. That's one of my favorite themes. And if a woman tells me that she is repeatedly being bothered, I immediately begin to wonder what she is doing to invite being bothered. Now, a woman might pass by a building under construction, and if she's halfway attractive, or even not maybe, the man sitting on the girder 6 stories up, might whistle at her just because she seems to be a woman down there, I don't attach any particular significance to that, but if you're talking about parties or bars or other social places, or even streets, or walking down the street, it's not just an issue of whether or not you're attractive, not just an issue whether or not the woman is attractive. It's the kind of woman she is. For example, that she projects a kind of weakness or insecurity, or that she can very easily be intimidated. And she is fairly attractive. You may be sure that a lot of men will make passes at her. But I know that women who project strength and self-confidence may be awfully good-looking. They are very rarely, I won't say never, they are relatively rarely troubled by unwanted passes. I say unwanted passes because sometimes you're with a man that you want to display interest in you, so we're talking now about unwelcome passes. I don't say it never happens because it can happen to anybody, but from my observations, it happens most frequently in proportion as the woman is insecure projects lack of self-confidence, lack of personal authority, and tends not to happen in proportion as the woman projects authority or self-confidence or strength. And that variable is quite independent of the question how good-looking she is. Of course, I might add one more word there, and that is that sometimes the woman who complains about it also goes out of her way to put herself into situations where it's likely to happen. So it isn't just an issue for being insecure and therefore indirectly inviting it. She may act in more direct ways to maneuver men into making passes at her, and then she can complain, oh man, all I care about is that. And I'll tell you the great advantage for a certain type of woman of that game, and it is a game. That's another way of trying to give yourself confidence in your own femininity without ever having to put it on the line. You see, I maneuver men into making passes at me. That confirms that I'm a woman. Then I become indignant and curse men. That protects me from ever having to be in a relationship with a man. So I get it both ways, you see.
Nathan, could you explain the psychological premise of a man who becomes infuriated at a suggestion from his wife and feels he's being castrated, but in the company of others defers to everyone?
Oh yes, I think what comes to mind there off the bat is this. If a man is very insecure and unself-confident, then he can go one of two ways. He can be constantly seeking people to make suggestions to him and give him advice, or he can be super resentful and anxious whenever anybody does so because he experiences that as a threat. He won't be able to stand against it. Now, the reason why such a man might get angry at his wife but not in public is because he's much too nervous and insecure publicly. He's too eager for people to like him, and therefore he would never protest publicly. But privately, he's got his wife, she's legally married, he's got a hold on her. It's a different kind of situation. But we do have to take into consideration the fact that there are an awful lot of wives in this world who do not know how to give suggestions, and an awful lot of husbands who do not know how to give suggestions. So far, my answer, take it for granted, that the problem is the husbands. And most likely it is if you describe the pattern that you do describe, where he always is deferential publicly and always angry privately. That does suggest the kind of insecure man I've just outlined. But just for objectivity, we do want to remember that there's a lot of art to giving other people suggestions without being patronizing or condescending or trying to take over their life, or implying disrespect, or implying, well, you don't know what's good for you, but I do, that can offend people. Suggestions should always be made with very conscious respect and with confidence that the other person can make decisions and that we are not the other person's father or mother or ruler. But assuming that's not what's involved, then I go back to my earlier explanation.
Do you feel that values can be derived from a non-romantic male-female relationship that cannot be gotten from either a romantic relationship or from a friendship between members of the same sex?
I really don't know. You're talking about the values that might obtain in a relationship between a man and a woman where there's no particular romantic interest. Could there be unique values or pleasures there that you wouldn't get from a romance and you wouldn't get from a friendship with the same sex? I think it's very safe to say yes, because any relationship can become unique and can give us something we don't get from any other relationship. So from one point of view, it's very easy to say yes. I think it's nice to have friends with the opposite sex. Obviously, we cannot be sexually involved with every member of the opposite sex that we like. It could be exhausting, aside from everything else. It would be impractical on many counts. But, you know, there can be sex to begin with between two people who don't have any great desire to sleep together. They're just of the opposite sex and they like each other. There's almost always, and I dare say always, a certain element of sex or sexual awareness that can be very nice as a theme that's present in the relationship, even if there's no great impulse for it to go anywhere. Just a kind of stressed awareness of what sex each party belongs to. And I think that can be of value simply in contributing to your sense of your own sexuality as a man or as a woman.